Welcome to our Bible study here at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Appleton, Wisconsin. Glad you're joining me today as we continue our study of God's Word. Available for you every Wednesday on our YouTube channel at noon, and then on demand you can watch any of our Bible studies, both today's and those in the past, at any time. Today we have Mark chapter 6, 30 to 44. And as you can probably tell by the image, we're talking about the feeding of the 5,000. And we see once again in our text, just as when the disciples were in the boat with Jesus and the storms were too much for the disciples to handle, now we have a group of people who are listening to Jesus and his ministry, and they are hungry. And feeding the disciples is too much for them to handle. And so Jesus, once again, shows his power and authority when he calmed the storm and as he multiplies the fish and the bread to feed the multitudes. So the training mission completed, the apostles reported to Jesus, but so pressing were the crowds, so pressing were the opportunities to serve people in their needs that they didn't even have time for basic needs. So as we think about the disciples and Jesus going about doing the work and sharing the gospel, we have to remember the demands placed on them and for you and me, but they needed a vacation, and we all need a vacation too. So Jesus said, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest for a while." Jesus and his disciples sailed away in search of that quiet place. But the eager, expectant, demanding crowd ran around the lake shore and was waiting for them. So it's hard to it's hard to escape if you're Jesus and the disciples. After all, the things that you've done and the needs of the people, they're coming to you, and that's a good thing. But as Jesus being fully man, the disciples as well, you're trying to balance, just as we do in the church, right? Try to balance our home life with our vocation of sharing the gospel with others and getting a time to reorientate ourselves from time to time. But the apostles returned to Jesus and told them that they had done what they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest for a while." So that's that little vacation, this interlude that Jesus wanted for himself and for his disciples. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. So that tells you a lot about the demands. And we know that if we're, physically and mentally weak and tired, it's hard for us to have the patience to go about the work that we need to do. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves, at least for a moment. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot, from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. So the need is great. Jesus is going to show compassion to them, as the good shepherd does. So what does it say about the crowd that Jesus saw them as sheep without a shepherd? Jesus knows they have a need, right? That they are people who need his help. And they are directionless, they're aimless, they're without protection from the dangers of that surround them. The people of Galilee needed the direction in life and evidently felt that need. And they saw that, and they believed that Jesus was the one to give them that need. He could fill their needs with his mighty power and warm their hearts with his teaching. Already we've seen this in Jesus' miracles, the raising of Jairus' daughter, the woman who had the blood flow that no one could heal for 12 years. Jesus did all of these things, and now you see, we have needs too. We have needs too, and they're coming to Jesus. So what does it say about Jesus that in his compassion for them, he was ready to shelve vacation plans and devote himself to teaching them many things? Jesus prioritized, right, their needs above his own. And he came to seek and to save the lost. And he was ready to fulfill their needs, even when their demands interrupted a vacation. This is a tricky part for us, isn't it? Because there are limitations, again, to our physical and emotional well-being. We need time to recharge and relax. And then we see the needs around us, and we're like, how can we? How should we? And Jesus takes his time, recognizing their need, to take that time away from his vacation to address their needs, have compassion on them. And I think we can do so likewise, have that balance within us. It can be that, I can help you out now, but then I've got to get away, and instruct others to do the same. And that's why the disciples are called. That's why the 72 were sent, so that there's more ambassadors of the gospel than just one person, right? To be able to do it, so that people can endeavor to other things. Even the early church showed that that not everyone did the same thing, so as to maximize their gifts and abilities. So the real-time situation, when we think about the disciples' view here, you have all of these people who are hungry, and they were very practical when Jesus said, you give them something to eat. That's how Jesus challenged them. And as they look at the crowd and they see everything that's around them, they know that that's impossible. In their practicality, they pointed to the immensity of such a task. Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat? Jesus told them to see what they could come up with. And they found 5 loaves and 2 fish. And Jesus took the loaves and the fish, looked up to heaven, gave thanks, and broke the loaves, and divided the fish for the disciples to distribute. And 5,000 men were fed, besides women and children. So the disciples see, again, like the storm, this is a situation that, we can't remedy. We can't remedy. But Jesus, shows, his power and authority here. Go gather what you can. He gives thanks, and the food is distributed because God has compassion. God has promised to take care of us and to provide for our needs. And this is an opportunity to show his disciples that he understands their physical and emotional needs, as well as those around them, and he provides ample support for them and for us too. So send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. That's the disciples' practicality. You give them something to eat. And they said to him, shall we go and buy the 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat? And he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And they find 5 and 2 fish. And then he commanded them to sit down in the groups in the green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing, and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples and set before the people. He divided the 2 fish among them all, and they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up the 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. We love this miracle. I mean, it's just so Jesus, right? We see the impossibility of the situation the disciples view, and Jesus shows all things are possible with me. Trust me, believe in me, trust God to provide. So remember, Mark was recording Peter's recollection of the event. How does Peter's pointing to the practicality of the disciples regarding the people's need add to the mystery and wonder of Jesus filling the need? What is suggested by Peter's pointing out that they gathered leftovers in 12 baskets? So the practical solution surely was to dismiss the crowd so they could provide for themselves. Come back, get some food, and we'll take care of it. So 8 months' wages for a day worker might provide enough for such a crowd. 8 months' wages. If they could find a supplier, 5 loaves and 2 fish, surely would not do any good. The practical details come together to emphasize the immensity of Jesus' miracle, right? 5,000. Sometimes fail to think about just what we are describing. Jewish men were going out into the countryside, were accustomed to carrying small wicker baskets attached to the cincher around the waist in which to carry provisions. But the disciples' departure from Capernaum, with Jesus and the crowds hurrying around the lake to find him, were not planned. There's the urgency here. There's a need here. This is not, we know Jesus is going to show up at this date and this time, and so we plan and prepare for it. So all the food they could come up with: 5 loaves, small loaves, and 2 dried fish. Does the fact that 12 baskets were filled with leftovers indicate that each one of the disciples filled his food basket in this way? That surely would have made a deep impression on each of them. Think of it, more leftovers than what they started with. So it's a miracle. And Jesus feeds the 5,000 men, not counting women and children. And this reminds us that Jesus says, don't worry about your life, what you eat, drink, wear. Your Heavenly Father knows that you need them, and so he takes care of our needs. And by taking care of their physical needs, Jesus was able to preach about the kingdom and teach them about eternal things. And we know that as we continue on in Jesus' life and ministry, that people focus more on the physical and the material than they did on the spiritual at times. But it was an opportunity for the disciples, again, to see Jesus' power and authority, that he is well in control of all situations, and that he does provide. So it's a wonderful narrative. It's good to focus on and to study and to think about our own lives and the needs we have, and that we can trust God as he provided for the crowd to provide for us as well. So thanks again for joining me today for Bible study. I look forward to our study again next week. Thanks again for joining me, and God bless your day.